Real estate wholesalers are suing homeowners. I'm going to read an article with you all. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to go over the details of this case. Now, this is not the only wholesaler that actually does this. This is just based off of this article with this particular situation, this specific homeowner and wholesaler. Now, let me know your thoughts, whether you agree or disagree with the wholesaler. Are you more on the homeowner side? And what steps would you take in order to prevent yourself into going into this type of situation? And how are you going to change your real estate contracts or your wholesaling dealings if you're faced with a situation like this? Please be sure to like, comment down below, and subscribe. Now let's go right into this situation. All right, home cash offers help some homeowners land others in legal trouble. Real estate wholesale companies offer quick cash for homes. Homeowners should know contracts can tie up a property indefinitely if a company desires. All right, so this article comes from Indiana. So essentially, a wholesaling company came to John, offered him a price $63,000. He said, okay, cool. He signed the contract. Shortly after reality hit, a few days after, he says he sent a text saying, I'm just too poor to move, right? His goal of buying a car so he could get around, especially to his appointments with doctors. That was before he realized how much housing costs had increased and how much he would spend finding a new place to live. Moore says selling would leave him worse off financially, so he tried to end the deal shortly after the company sued. So that's the premise of this article, and we're going to go way more in details, but this is a reality that this could happen because most of the time as wholesalers we make an agreement and we say, hey, this is a binding contract. And some wholesaling companies, they don't try to fight a homeowner. If a homeowner changed their mind, they just move on to the next deal, right? But other companies, when they have systems in place, they're looking at every single detail, every single number. They look at the numbers to see if it makes sense for them to sue people, whether to sue them or not, or just move on to the next deal. And some companies, some wholesalers decide to go this route of suing. So we're going to dive in deeper, but please let me know down below, what would you do in that situation? Are you the type of wholesaler that would go this far in order to get a contract, or to, force a seller essentially to sell you their home, or to agree upon some sort of settlement in order to, resolve the situation? So he signed a contract with the wholesale real estate company. The real estate professional with whom 13 investigators spoke with us. Wholesaling is not new, of course. You see wholesale companies, each company operates differently. A real estate wholesaler offers homeowner like more quick cash to purchase their property. Right after a sale goes through, a wholesaler makes money on the difference between the original cash and the second buyer. So Midwest Cash Offer, this was the company that this individual worked with. And I got to give props to this company for, going to the interview and showing their face and saying, yes, we are that company that is suing this man, this elderly man. We help people navigate to sell their property that otherwise extremely difficult to do, right? So Mancha says his company has purchased nearly 4,000 homes in these different states. Speed is the name of the game. Just a few clicks. Research by Drexel University found this kind of cash agreement does help some, but the study also found there are real concerns. Some wholesalers exploit low information or vulnerable homeowners, right? And so you can see that because a lot of times these wholesalers, or honestly, you get the best deal when you're finding a distressed property, right? When it needs a ton of work, when someone doesn't have the money or the funds to do that, and they can't necessarily list it on the market because it's just more difficult to do that. So they look for an investor sell. And people in that situation, they either don't have the money or they don't have the knowledge to do all these things. And so there is a place for people who don't have the resources to fix up their property, to sell it on the market, to sell to an investor. But yes, sometimes maybe if they see somebody's age or even their race or their income level, they maybe lowball them even lower or different things like that. So people do that in all types of businesses. So that may happen even in with some wholesalers. But let's continue. Dave Hirsch with the Kelley School of Business in Indiana University agreed to review agreements signed by Moore and other homeowners involving Midwest cash offers specifically. Obviously, somebody's losing out, and that's the homeowner, right? So one of his concerns is that Midwest Cash Offer does not pay earnest money up front. Earnest money is a deposit made by the buyer to show that they are putting forth a good faith offer. Usually a buyer provides it within days of an offer to show they are serious about a purchase. The contract Hertz review concerning Moore gave Midwest Cash Offer about 25 days to provide $2,000 after it's granted access to the home. In other contracts, the earnest money was set to $1,500 or $100, and some contracts did not mention earnest money. So this wholesaler didn't have an earnest money deposit. I've done deals where I haven't done earnest money deposits, especially if it's lower price. If I'm buying a $30,000 house, 1% of that is $300. Even though that's maybe good to lock in the deal and to show, hey, yeah, I'm serious about this deal, it may not be worth it. And sometimes you just don't want to put up the front put the cash up front, because let's say inspection comes and there's just a bunch of issues, and then you have to go back to the title company and get your deposit back, where it's just all like, hey, I can get everything done within a week or so. Let me just do all my due diligence and get things done before even sending any sort of money. So they're trying to look for a way to back out of this without even putting earnest money up, okay? So that's his criticism, which I understand. I do see that point. At the same time, the company contract is written to prevent a seller from backing out. In fact, the contract states that the company can hold the homeowner to a deal in perpetuity. That means forever. So homeowners need to understand this. And the thing is, a lot of homeowners are not knowledgeable of this, right? They don't know how to read a contract. They don't have the right lawyers or agents. They're not dealing with the agent. And so it's just more difficult doing it that way. That's why I do agree that some people who are not knowledgeable, don't have a lot of resources, just work with an agent and put it as is on the MLS, right? You can still do that. But yeah, some people just want fast cash. So Hirsch said that he does not think the agreements he reviewed are ethical. Absolutely not. I think it is presented to prospective sellers in a way that creates a high degree of likeliness of misinterpretation, where the seller does not understand fully the terms of the contract and what they're getting into. Manship, on the other hand, disagrees, telling 13 Investigates, the company in-house attorney created a video explaining all these documents, but they were saying that, okay, this video explaining all these clauses came after this story came out, so it kind of defeats the purpose. But Midwest Cash Offer sued Moore and about 20 other homeowners in Indiana between 2021 and 2025. In court documents, the company said the sellers failed and refused to perform the obligations to sell the property. That's why it's important, because if it's in writing, it's binding, right? And you can't, and I've made this mistake, right? I've made this mistake before. Maybe I could tell in another video where I went on a contract and I wasn't 100% sure of it, and I tried to back out, and it was just, that's for another video. But essentially, this company is used to doing this. They do this on a regular basis, and they think it's worth it for their company to go after homeowners who don't sell them their properties. We don't like to do it, and we don't want to do it. We are simply holding our sellers accountable to what was signed. This other person, Latoya Johnson, is one of the homeowners the company is suing. She signed a contract, and after months of conversations with the company employees, she locked in a price. He didn't tell me that I was going to be closing on the home in 30 days. She was shocked when the company pushed her to close the deal. She said, my father's fighting for his life. It's just not the right time, whatever. And then Manship wrote, we have scheduled closing for the sale. Boom, boom, boom. She failed to show despite repeated documented attempts to contact. After dozens of documented attempts to accommodate and facilitate the closing, Ms. Johnson is in breach of the contract. Shortly after the court granted Midwest Cash Offer a default judgment, the lawsuit was first filed in July. Indiana court state defendants should respond within 20 to 23 days. Court records show Johnson first responded to the lawsuit in November. So this person took a long time to respond. So if you're in this situation, you have to be on top of it. Like, even though you want to fight it or you don't want to pay it, you have to be in contact. Say, hey, I'm getting with my lawyer and we're trying to fix this. Be in contact with my lawyer. But this person seemed like they took a while to respond to them and thinking that the company is just going to go away. So when she tried to tell her story in court in January, the judge told her he could not take her situation into account. Wow. So it's crazy because this thing started, let's see, Latoya Johnson, she's in 30 days. We had scheduled closing. So the first scheduled closing was May 24th, 2024. And they finally came into court in January. It said, again, in January hearing, I just had to bury my father. Based on the evidence produced by the company, the court said Johnson owed Midwest Cash Offer $18,415. What the company said it would have made on the deal, $13,000, plus more than $5,000 in attorney fees. Now let's pause here for a second. So these companies are actually making money going after homeowners, right? So is this something that you would do as a wholesaler? For me personally, even though I have clauses like this in my contract where, hey, me, the buyer, I can cancel anytime. I usually allow the seller to cancel, even if my contract has stronger language about them not canceling. I'm just not gonna push it. That's just not my battle to fight. But I understand other businesses, and maybe that's why they're more successful than me. They go after homeowners. And as you can see, they're even paying for their attorney's fees because a lot of these contracts say, hey, if we decide to sue you, you have to pay for our attorney fees. And so that's what happened here. So she has to pay over $18,000. And so now, if she doesn't have that money, she cannot even sell her home because there's a judgment against her name. There's a judgment against her home. So if she does decide to sell her home, they're going to have to be paid first before her getting her money for the sale of her home. So as you can tell, is it worth it? According to this article, it is worth it to sue homeowners because they ended up making $13,000. So even if they paid their own attorney fees, they paid $5,000 with their attorney fees, but got back $13,000, they would still make $8,000, right? Because you put in 5 and you got back 13. That's $8,000. So it still makes sense, but it did take them a while. It took them maybe 7 months to collect this, and some companies are patient with that. Her said Johnson's story is a prime example of why plaintiffs should respond immediately if sued. The worst thing that you can do is not respond, right? Because they will get a default judgment, and now you're behind the 8 ball, and it makes it a lot more challenging to get out of it. Hirsch says fighting to end a signed legal agreement is already difficult, even with the lawyer's help. For those reasons, he encouraged homeowners to get their own lawyer to review a contract before signing. The potential for abuse with this type of contract is fairly significant in my opinion. In Indiana, there's little regulatory oversight over these type of transactions. So right now in Indiana, there's no like, hey, you need a license, or you need a license. Sorry, y'all. The website started playing music, but you need a license in order to wholesale real estate. So you can still do that. But yeah, in this case, Mingship, he's a broker, but he doesn't do anything. We do it just to be beyond approach. We do it so no one can sniff around and have this happen, really. We don't have a responsibility to the homeowners. Manship said we're acquiring the property. And that's true. Moore said he wanted to sell before he truly understood the terms of the contract. So going back to the original homeowner in the beginning of the article, but the house is now packed despite his attempts to represent himself in court. So he doesn't even have a lawyer. He's trying to do it himself. He can't find or afford an attorney. He knows that the company he's doing is legal, but does not think it's right. I know it's not right. You know, not for common sense and common man. If you're in this situation, let's say this is your very first deal, you have a great deal and you have some extra cash to pay for an attorney, would you sue a homeowner to fulfill their end of the contract? Because technically they would breach the contract. Would you go that far? And you will have to wait, honestly, within 7 months, that's pretty quick. Most of the time to get this money back will probably take a year or so. And even this woman, she probably is not going to pay anytime soon. But still, are you willing to go to that length to sue a homeowner? Do you think it's morally right to do that, especially if it's an older person? They don't quite understand the contract and the verbiage of everything. What are your thoughts, and would this be something you would do? All right, you all enjoyed this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, comment down below, and I'll talk to you all later.